Welcome to this edition of Backstage Pass with Leah Chang. I'm your host, Leah Chang. On this edition of Backstage Pass with Leah Chang, I celebrated playwrights David Henry Hwang and Moisés Kaufman at the National Arts Club's presentation of the Medals of Honor for Achievement in Theater, held at the landmark Tilden Mansion, the home of the NAC in New York City on November 10, 2025. Speakers for the evening included David Masello, co-chair of the Theater Committee of the National Arts Club, multiple Tony, Emmy, Grammy, Golden Globe, and Screen Actors Guild Award winner John Lithgow via video message, Emmy Award-winning actor Michael Emerson, 2025 Tony Award-winning actor Francis Ju, two-time Tony-nominated director Leigh Silverman, Tectonic Theater Project Executive Director and producer of Here There Are Blueberries, Matt Joslyn. Tara Cortes, president of the National Arts Club, presented the medals to David Henry Hwang and Moisés Kaufman. David Henry Hwang, the Tony and Grammy Award-winning author of M. Butterfly, Yellowface, and Chinglish, is a three-time Obie Award recipient and three-time Pulitzer Prize finalist. He has recently been elected into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame, and presented with the Dramatists Guild's Lifetime Achievement Award. David Henry Hwang and Hwang Ro's latest opera, The Monkey King, is making its world premiere at San Francisco Opera this month. The pair recently received a Grammy nomination for their opera An American Soldier, produced by PAC NYC.
For tonight, the National Arts Club bestows its biggest, its most prestigious, its most glamorous and glorious award, the Medal of Honor in Theater, on two people, each of whom has made history in their own right. Never before has the club bestowed this medal to two unrelated people, David Henry Hwang and Moisés Kaufman. When we all met to decide who would be worthy to receive the Medal of Honor, it was a unanimous, instantaneous, drama-free, but filled with drama, decision to name David Henry Hwang and Moisés Kaufman as joint recipients of the 2025 Medal of Honor in Theater. As your appetizers marinate now on your plates, the paint continues to dry on the canvases of their portraits, which I think you just saw, and they were painted by our resident master painter, Michael Shane Neal. And their depictions will hang in our portrait gallery for generations, and we suspect that they will be as visited as the Mona Lisa. So yes, while we are making history tonight at the club, David and Moisés made history and continue to make history with their writings and their productions.
Hello, David. It's John speaking to you from London. I wish I could be with you tonight, with everyone else, to help celebrate you and honor you with this extraordinary tribute. I'm in London because I've just wrapped up the run of a play called Giant. Forgive me for a little bit of self-promotion. Giant was a tremendous success in the West End and is heading to Broadway in the spring. I only bring it up because Giant has been an extraordinary experience, like nothing I've ever been a part of since M. Butterfly in 1988. That is the thing that made us friends and collaborators, and collaborators on a magnificent project. What these two plays have in common, they are my two favorite theater experiences. Both of them were bold, daring visions that sprung from the minds of passionate playwrights. I have mostly worked for playwrights in new plays in my stage career, but almost always the plays had been tried out elsewhere. They had arrived in New York or London and thrown in front of a very critical press and audience. None of them have succeeded like M. Butterfly and Giant, but also none of them were quite so daring. I was a part of the creation of these plays. Nobody had played these parts before. I was working with two marvelous directors, Nick Heitner and that genius monster John Dexter, our collaborator David, but also playwrights who were fiercely intelligent, had a very personal story to tell and share and challenge audiences with. And they were just great collaborators. I mean, who but you, David, could have brought out the very best in John Dexter, not just in his staging of the play, but in the way he collaborated with all of us actors and treated us like human beings, not something he was well known for. David, you are a marvel. Since that great experience of M. Butterfly, I've watched you grow into a great citizen of the theater. Writing, of course, about the Asian American experience, but just as deeply about the human condition, cultivating audiences, cultivating the interest of young people in theater. There have been 3 or 4 productions that I have done in New York where you have brought a dozen students with you to see plays and experience theater firsthand, bringing them backstage to listen to an actor talk about what it's really like to be a part of the theater experience. Your play, like Giant, also is the best example I have of being a part of something that represented the intersection of emotion and ideas. Pieces of theater that made an audience feel just as deeply as they thought, and thought just as deeply as they felt, as they were experiencing actors up on stage pretending to be real. David, you're a genius, and you're one of a kind. What you have done for Asian American writers and audiences is like no one else. But you've also just reached out to all of us. You've crossed the line between theater and musical theater, and you've just been a constant, gracious and courageous advocate on behalf of us theater workers. You are honored tonight, but all of us are honored by you. Me in particular. No one has had a better time creating one of your roles. Much love to you, David. Have a wonderful time. And I will just tip my hat to Moisés Kaufman, I was thrilled to see that he's an honoree tonight too. But you, David, you are an essential part of my life and career. Thank you, I love you, and congratulations.
I first met David Henry Hwang in 1989, some 36 years ago. I've worked with David on M. Butterfly, Kung Fu, Soft Power, Yellowface. I even did a speaking role in his opera, Dream of the Red Chamber. I could say so much, but the National Arts Club asked me to be brief, so. There have been leaders in the American theater and eras defined by O'Neill, Miller, Williams, Wasserstein. But living today, with all of today's accomplishments and challenges, I would argue that we have been living in the era of David Henry Hwang. David has achieved many firsts and is often lauded as the first Asian American playwright on Broadway, but for me and for decades, David has also been America's leading playwright. He's always been ahead of the curve. When David premiered Yellowface at the Public Theater in 2007, I remember many Asian American artists confiding in me, asking me why David was still writing about identity, about being Asian. Obama was going to be president. They were tired of identifying as Asian. They simply wanted to be recognized as American. And wasn't all that struggle just in the past? When Yellowface was revived last year on Broadway, the conversation among many of my friends was very different than in 2007. Many said they hadn't realized how much they borrowed from and relied on David for so long. Often they said, how did David know back in 2007 what we would be going through right now? We are all catching up to what David has been writing. David has proven to be prescient, the conscience we thought we didn't need, making connections between the personal, the political, and the artistic. David has warned us, laughed with us, bemoaned with us, and somehow pointed our eyes toward a kind of hope. I hope one day and soon we all catch up to David's compassion as well. In Yellowface, David wrote, "It feels good to be part of something bigger than myself." And he gave that line to the white antagonist in the play. That's a generosity very few of us witness these days. David's experimentation with form epitomizes not just his own artistic curiosity and prowess, but also the range of human experience and capacity that we all share, and more particularly, that Asians share. His very first play, FOB, already dealt head-on with the tension between what makes us Chinese and what qualifies us as American, embracing multiple identities as a strength, actually a uniquely American attribute. His work insists that Asian Americans are as diverse as humanity, having the same capacity for universal human frailty, heroism, and hubris. David has led our cultural discourse for decades. He has helped us articulate to ourselves the world around us and the worlds within us. He hasn't written bitter indictments, even when it came to writing about the time he was stabbed. Rather, he writes with a sense of humor that comes from compassion and understanding that in America, we say we strive to live together as one people. At my callback for M. Butterfly in 1989 to become the new understudy, legendary producer Stuart Ostrow asked if I thought I could do the Beijing opera. And before I could say anything, David piped up, saying that I had tons of dance experience on my resume, so of course I could do it. Well, actually, for once, David was wrong. Honestly, I didn't think I could do it, but one of the many brilliant things about David is that he sees in us the potential to be better. He may be writing, as he has said in interviews, from his own subconscious, but I believe he is always writing for us, in the hopes that his reflections on the questions burning inside of him will make us all just a little better. As a playwright, as a librettist of musicals and operas, as a screenwriter, as a teacher, as an activist, as a citizen, David has been creating new forms, giving me and myriad others a voice to better understand ourselves and better see the humanity in each other. He's been getting it right for decades. He's the epitome of soft power, creating a counterculture that has succeeded in influencing and becoming mainstream culture. Throughout his career, David has told the truth. It's an honor to have this opportunity to tell the truth about David. It's David Henry Hwang's era, and we're lucky enough to be living in it. Bravo, David.
David's play Chinglish was a hit in Chicago and then New York, as was Yellowface on Broadway, due in large part to Leigh Silverman, their visionary director. And so I want to welcome Ms. Silverman to the stage now.
When I met David almost 20 years ago, he had already been through a lot of ups and downs. He had had such abundant success early in life, been produced barely out of undergrad at Stanford by legendary producer Joe Papp at the Public Theater with a play he wrote in his dorm, The Amazing FOB. More plays followed. He had downtown acclaim, and then M. Butterfly launched him into the national spotlight and a Tony win. A movie of M. Butterfly followed, a couple very public, very disappointing endeavors, more successful Broadway shows, and in 2006, when we first met, he was coming off a 10-year run of making successful musicals with Disney, Aida and Tarzan. And when we met, he was looking to write a play about his second Broadway show, Face Value, that was a flop and had only run for 8 previews and closed before opening. He described it as docu-theater meets Waiting for Guffman. And it's really amazing, actually, that Moisés is here, because the Laramie Project was a play we referenced constantly for its seriousness and successful intent of docu-theater, and what we were trying to do, which was a little bit the opposite. And he kept saying that I wanted to be a really funny satire. And I've since learned that when David is going to write an extremely personal play, he always says, I want it to be a really funny satire. And our first meeting went terribly. He thought I didn't like the play. I loved the play. I was starstruck and intimidated. And it was this kind of true meet cute story, because he left and it was clear we were never going to work together, and that was it. And I was devastated. And then he called me the next day and he said something like, you don't understand the play at all. But I think the way you talked about it made me understand something about it, and we should work together on it. And I love this story, first of all, because 9 projects later, we're still going strong, thank God, but also because that really sums up who David is. Ego aside, willing to listen, willing to revise, willing to collaborate, his heart and mind only in the direction of the work. That play turned out to be Yellowface, and it turned into one of the funniest, yes, but also one of the sharpest politically and deepest personally in his whole canon of work. The play is wild structurally. The play should not work. Like, on paper it should not work, but it really, really works. It starts out as, yes, docu-theater, and yes, then turns into a farcical backstage comedy, then morphs at least 2 more times before landing squarely in a deeply earned emotional wallop of an ending. It broke the mold in 2007, and when we revived it last year on Broadway, as Frances says, on more than one occasion, a young playwright would find me and say, I didn't even realize what an impact this play had on me, and I've been stealing everything that I write from it. And we filmed that revival for PBS Great Performances, and I know it will continue to resonate with audiences for generations, as will Frances Chu's Tony-winning performance.
Yay.
And the writing is so good, and the culture finally caught up to it, as did, unfortunately, our regressive, racist political times. David has said, every failure offers something to be learned, and every success has some drops of poison in it, which I think is incredibly profound. And in my humble opinion, what makes David an exemplary artist, one that is so deserving of this award, isn't just his success. It's the longevity, the stamina. It is the life of a visionary artist open to innovation and reinvention. David, I love you.
Tonight we're deeply honored to present 2 medals in the field of theater to this pair of extraordinary artists who are with us tonight. So to David Henry Hwang, for his exceptional strength as a storyteller, illuminating the complexities of identity and culture through his masterful voice in the American theater. And to Moisés Kaufman, for his visionary direction and the powerful empathy that infuses his work that challenges, heals, and brings communities together through the stage. Each of you has shaped the landscape of contemporary art and theater in ways that deepen our understanding of humanity itself. So I do this all at the same time. David and Moisés, congratulations, and thank you for making our world a better place.
Thank you, National Arts Club, for this evening that I will never forget, that is extraordinary and moving and transformative and really makes one feel like, wow, I guess I got to do something with my life. Thanks to Linda and Tara and Richard and Steve, and certainly those who have said such amazing and flattering and kind of insightful words about me. John and Leigh and Francis, love you so much. So I started wanting to write plays in college, and I don't quite know why, but the idea of creating worlds which then would come to life before my eyes was incredibly appealing. And I went to college with a wonderful playwright who was taken from us too soon, Harry Condolian. And yes. And Harry used to say that playwriting is the ultimate arrogance, because you literally put words in other people's mouths. But if that's true, it's a fairly constructive use of that. The summer before my senior year in college, I saw an ad in the LA Times calendar, I'm originally from Los Angeles, that said study playwriting with Sam Shepard. And it was the first year of what eventually became a pretty prominent event in Southern California theater, the Padre Hills Playwrights Festival. But this was only the first year that they ever tried to do it, so there were only 2 of us that applied, so we both got in. And at Padre, Sam, but perhaps most significantly, a wonderful Cuban-American playwright named Maria Irene Fornés, who was, I would argue, the great playwriting teacher of her generation. And as Francis referenced, they taught us to write more from our subconscious, to bypass the rational, to follow your impulse, and to be brave enough to go where you don't necessarily know the destination. I have spent most of my career, not all of it, but a lot of it working on Asian and AAPI stories. But when I went to Padua, I didn't know that I was interested in these subjects. I grew up with immigrant parents during a very assimilationist era, and so, we didn't learn Chinese. I didn't know when Chinese New Year was, any of those things. But when I started following Sam and Irene's exercises, I found these issues appearing on the page, things that I didn't know I was interested in, like assimilation and racism and immigration and clash of cultures. So clearly, some part of me was incredibly interested in these issues, but my conscious mind hadn't figured that out yet. And ever since then, writing has been a way for me to hold the mirror up to myself and find out what I really feel inside in terms of my relationship to myself, but also my relationship to my society, my country, my community, and the world around me. And once I knew I was going to start writing about these subjects, I started learning about them. And it seems to me this is an example of the reciprocal relationship between art and the artist. That in a literal sense, the artist creates the work, but it is equally true that the work recreates the artist. And so when I think about looking back on getting to do a life of art, I feel like what's primarily important to me is this investigation of the relationship between self and society. And a successful work is one where we learn more about ourselves and the questions that we set out to answer. Everything else, whether it gets produced, whether it's a hit, whether it gets bad reviews, whether it closes in previews, we don't have any control over that. The only thing we have control over is the work that we do for ourselves. And so, therefore, everything else is the icing on the cake. But the cake itself is the work. Who am I? And what is my relationship to the world? And however you define that question, I think part of the beauty of it is that there's really no definitive answer, because the answer continues to change. I feel like, okay, if I ever knew the answer, then I don't need to make art anymore. I don't even know if I need to live on this planet anymore, because the fundamental questions change, and therefore the real query becomes, who am I, and what is my relationship to the world now? When I look back, I have some shows that I think deserve better, and maybe other opportunities that where I got a little more than I deserved. But there's a show that I'm working on now, which is based on a documentary called Particle Fever. And it's a musical, thank you. Particle Fever team over there. It's a musical based on a documentary called Particle Fever, which is about the discovery of the Higgs boson, the God particle, at the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. And there's a quote from the documentary that I really love, and so of course I'm stealing it for the musical. And there's a character that says, "The big secret to success is going from failure to failure with undiminished enthusiasm." And thanks to you all, thanks to the National Arts Club for affirming that I'm continuing on from failure to success to failure, but with undiminished enthusiasm.
Moisés Kaufman is a 2015 National Medal of Arts recipient and Obie and Lucille Lortel Award winner, best known for The Laramie Project, Gross Indecency, The Three Trials of Oscar Wilde, and Here There Are Blueberries.
Citizens of the theater here tonight. And one of them is the actor Michael Emerson, star of Moisés Kaufman's Gross Indecency, The Three Trials of Oscar Wilde. So, let's welcome Michael Emerson, aka Oscar Wilde.
It is in a spirit of gratitude and admiration that I reminisce a little about my dear friend Moisés Kaufman. We met in 1996. I was an actor from the South with a classical background, working a retail job in Manhattan, looking for a way forward, looking for a break. And boy, did I get one. Our friend Maren Hinkle said, "There's this guy downtown named Moisés Kaufman. He's working on a show about Oscar Wilde, and he's looking for grown-up actors who can do a good British accent." Apparently, there's no script, just a stack of documents. Well, this sounded interesting to me. I'm into documents. And I was mad about Oscar Wilde, and I thought, I'm going to offer this man my services. And somehow, I don't even remember how, I found myself part of this gang of actors working together with Moisés. We got together a lot. Evenings, weekends, workshops, readings. We did a lot of readings. We were telling the story of Oscar Wilde's demise, and the stack of documents was mostly found texts relating to Wilde's private life, his career, his famous trial. They were court transcripts, newspaper articles, essays, letters. It was a strange way to work. We weren't going to write a play, we were going to build or construct a play out of all those papers. Well, I had never been a part of anything like that. Moisés liked to say that it was a tectonic project, meaning structure. It was a wonderful but fiendishly difficult puzzle to solve. How would we bring all this dry paper to life? How can so much prose become a poem, a thing with fire and beauty in it? The answer is very slowly and very carefully. This was the challenge Moisés had set for himself and for us, and the solution, the finished work, was so different, so soulful and precise that it was stunning. Our play, called Gross Indecency, was a greater success than we could have dreamed. Audiences were gripped by the story and by the ingenious manner in which it was told. Our raw materials were more documentary than literary, but we found new dramatic power in our focus on selection, placement, layering, juxtaposition. It was a tectonic wonder. Moisés was confident that the devices of other art forms, sculpture, collage, music, architecture, could be employed in the theater and in the right hands made into something exquisite. I've never worked on anything that made me so proud. I have worked with many directors since then, but never in a setting like those long ago rehearsals. Papers everywhere. Laughter and argument, inspiration, frustration, and always Moisés at the head of the table. Our jovial, loving, meticulous paterfamilias, patiently honing every beat, every line, every transition into a moment of clarity and power. Of all the directors in my life, Moisés Kaufman will always be the poet. And it is that heightened aesthetic that he brings to everything he does. And so we are here tonight to celebrate this great moment of recognition from Moisés and to see his portrait added to this historic collection. God bless you. Congratulations. I love you.
Good evening. I'm privileged tonight to be given the opportunity, the first opportunity in 9 years of working together, to give a speech about my friend, my creative partner, my co-conspirator, the person with whom I have been in the trenches for nearly a decade, dreaming, toiling, stressing, rejoicing, building, laughing, drinking,
crying,
fighting, crying, fighting sometimes. Moisés has heard me say many times that as a producer, my most important role is to support the vision of the artist and to know when to push and when to lift. Moisés says that I know when to push and when to shove. And also lift. In the time that Moisés and I have been partners at Tectonic Theater Project, I've learned a couple of things. First, I've learned that the words good enough do not exist in Moisés Kaufman's vocabulary. Second, that theater in his hands isn't just a place to tell stories, it's a place to ask questions, big ones, dangerous ones, the kind that stop you in your tracks and recalibrate the way you see the world. And third, that he has this uncanny ability to take apart a play, or a moment, or a movement, and show you how it ticks. I remember one night early in our partnership, we went to see The Little Foxes on Broadway. Remember that incredible production with Laura Linney and Cynthia Nixon? I was unexpectedly deeply moved, and I couldn't figure out why the play worked so well. I asked him what I thought was a rhetorical question about that ineffable quality of truly great art. For over an hour, over drinks, I got a master class from Moisés. He knew exactly why it was great. He dissected the play for me scene by scene, breaking down how the tension builds, how the silences do the storytelling, how the moral architecture of the piece holds together like the gears of a watch. He spoke about it the way an engineer might describe a bridge, or a composer a symphony. By the end of it, I realized I hadn't just seen the little foxes that night, I'd seen into the mind of someone who truly understands how theater works. That's what it's like to be around him. He's constantly illuminating the art form, helping you see it in deeper, sharper focus. And that's what he's done his whole career, from Gross Indecency to 33 Variations to our great collaboration together, Here There Are Blueberries, and all the work that's come since. He's built a theater that is both rigorous and radical, one that believes that art can provoke empathy, ignite conversation, and shift the culture toward justice. And yet for all that brilliance, for all of that intellect, he leads with heart. He leads with curiosity. He cares deeply about people, and he creates rooms that nurture collaboration and participation. He believes that actors are the most underused resource in the American theater, considered by most to be only interpretive artists. In Moisés's rooms, everyone is a generative artist. The actors, the stage managers, the production assistants, everyone in the room is a storyteller. So tonight, I stand with you here and I think about all the people, audiences around the world, students in classrooms and rehearsal studios and laboratories, artists, dreamers, makers, who've been transformed by the work of Tectonic Theater Project and by Moisés's vision. And I think this is exactly what a life in art should look like. The National Arts Club Medal of Honor is meant to recognize those who've made an indelible mark on our culture. Moisés, your mark isn't just on the stage, it's on the people who've sat in the dark and found themselves illuminated by what you've made. Moisés, thank you for your passion, your precision, your impossible standards, and your friendship. And thank you for showing us again and again the truth when it's told with bravery and love and boundless imagination, can change the world. Congratulations, my dear friend.
I want to acknowledge that there is one actor in this room who has been both in my plays and in David's plays, and it is the formidable, magnificent Kathy Silverman. Kathy was in M. Butterfly, and more recently in Here There Are Blueberries. And what a great honor it is to have you with us, Kathy. You are one of the greats, and we are so fortunate to have you with us. I saw M. Butterfly when I first arrived in New York. And here I was, a Venezuelan kid, Jewish, gay, deciding that I wanted to be in the theater. And I got to see John Lithgow, our beloved John Lithgow, do M. Butterfly. And it was such a revelation to be in the presence of that play. Number one, it was stunningly interesting. It was a work of great passion and intellect. And I thought, theater can do all of that? So I am so honored to be here with you tonight, David, because it was a gateway into America for me. And I thought, maybe there is a room for me to make work here. So thank you. I want to talk for 1 second about Michael Emerson, who is a gigantic, gigantic human and star. We started doing a Tectonic Theater Project started, and for the first 4 years of the company, we usually had more people on stage than in the audience. I'm not being sarcastic, there was one play we did that had 2 actors on stage, and there was 1 person in the audience. And then years later, I was doing a play on Broadway, and somebody came to me and said, "Remember, I saw this play that you did. I was the only member in the audience." I was like, I'm so grateful. But Michael joined Tectonic Theater Project when we were at that stage, where we were the best kept secret in American theater. And I had written my first play called Gross Indecency, The 3 Trials of Oscar Wilde, and I had cast Michael as one of the lawyers in the play. And because we didn't have any money, the casting process to cast Oscar Wilde was rather diminished. And the casting director, who was herself very talented but also didn't have any money, was conducting all of her auditions in the basement of a building. And the basement was very dark. And so I cast this actor, who was a wonderful actor, was a bit too old for the role. Oscar Wilde, at the moment of the trials, was 40 years old. This actor was 75. And because of the dim light in the basement where we were casting, I didn't realize that. So we have the first day of rehearsal, and it was in the basement of a church, because that was all we could afford as a rehearsal space. And he walked in, and I thought, oh my God, I have completely screwed myself over. This is never going to work. And we had the first day of rehearsals, and I got home that night, and I was so mortified. I had spent 3 years writing this play. And I go to my husband, and I said, "Jeff, I think I made a horrible mistake. I've cast the wrong person as Oscar Wilde." And he says, "Why?" I said, "Because he's 75 and the actor was 40. And my husband, in his wisdom, says, "He's an actor. He can play 40. And I was like, "You're right. He can play 40. But just to be safe, come tomorrow to rehearsal, and you will see him, and then you'll tell me if this is okay." So he came the next morning. We had the first hour and a half session, and then we take a break. And I said, "Jeff, so what do you think?" He says, "He's too old." So I immediately started calling some friends who could play Oscar. But I had been seeing Michael do this incredible work as a lawyer in the play. And I said, "Michael, would you mind coming in and auditioning for Oscar Wilde?" And he said, "Yes, of course, I'll come." So he came the next morning, and as we were about to start the audition, he said, "Moisés, I'm very happy to be auditioning for this, but I want you to know that I am very comfortable with my role. I love my role. So if you decide that I'm not right for this role, please don't worry. I'm perfectly fine with the role that I'm casting." And I thought, what a mensch. At that moment, that was a moment that could change his career. He was worried about me. And he came and auditioned, and I cast him as Oscar Wilde, and it was the best decision of my life. It changed your life, and it changed my life. And it was a magical moment. And since then, Michael has had the career he deserves, because he's one of our great actors. So thank you for all the kind things you said about me. One day I hope to reciprocate. When I walked in through these doors and I saw my portraits and David's portraits, I was a little alarmed. I mean, the portrait, God bless, the painter is wonderful. I loved it. I thought I was very well represented. But isn't portrait the thing that you do to artists when you put them in mausoleums? So I was a little terrified, but then I was talking to Michael Emerson, and I said, "I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a great, wonderful thing on the painting, so that the painting will age ungracefully, while David and I remain as youthful as we are now." So if you come to see that portrait soon, you will see that it has changed for the worse. The National Arts Club was a club that was made by artists. It was made by artists for artists. And I think it's a very moving tribute to be honored by artists. That's what, at the end of the day, as David says, we don't care about reviews, we don't care about we care about being honored by other artists. So this is a great honor, and I'm very, very grateful. Richard Sheehan, thank you so much for nominating me. Sarah, thank you. Thank you for being here. I want to believe in times like these that are so difficult and so politically damaging that art has a spiritual ministry, that it can raise and sanctify everything that we as human beings touch. And in that context, I think that we have the ability and the power to speak to people in a much higher level than religion or politics, because we can address people both in their brains and in their hearts and remind them of our common humanity. So in times like this, I want to believe that our responsibility is heightened and that the work we do is more important than ever. And so here it is to all of the artists who are hopefully turning the curve of the universe towards justice. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this edition of Backstage Pass with Leigh Chang. Until next time.